For the next conversation, Igniting the Power of Influence, Investing for Tomorrow, please welcome moderator Moira Forbes, President and Publisher ForbesWomen and EVP Forbes, and panelists Igor Tulchinsky, Founder, Chairman, and CEO, WorldQuant, Erin Harkless Moore, Managing Director of Investments, Pivotal Ventures, Bing Chen, Co-Founder and CEO, Goldhouse, and Michael Anders, Founder, ICONIQ Capital.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be up here again this afternoon. I'm really excited for this panel because we have leaders who are at the forefront of thinking about new frameworks, mindsets, and innovation tools to really have a catalytic effect around impact and progress, whether that be more directly in the business arena or the philanthropic arena. And how do we really accelerate new models and create this idea exchange that I think many of us would appreciate some of the lessons to be learned from the extraordinary work that you all are doing. So thank you to you all. Mike, I'm going to start with you. You at ICONIQ have really pioneered this really interesting approach in terms of bringing together your network and bringing together your investors for ICONIQ impact. You're deploying significant amounts of capital. I think over $500 million of grants have been announced. You're creating collabs. You are actually putting capital in the hands of really transformative leaders very, very quickly. And you've done so in a handful of years. Can you talk about this model and how it goes against the grain in terms of some of the more traditional ways that we've been approaching this sector?
Sure. Thanks, Moira, for having us. I think the big challenge in philanthropy right now is not lack of solutions. It's lack of understanding how to get capital to those solutions. And what we found was most of our clients were founders and still running businesses. And while the world's problems were not going away, in fact, they were becoming more and more challenging, we lacked time to get that money to those organizations. And we wanted to create a platform that would foster collaboration, that would lean on subject matter experts and give the confidence of our client base that they could get the money to organizations quickly, efficiently, and know that those organizations were highly vetted and being sourced by folks that really understood the space. And so we created ICONIQ Impact with this notion of this collab model. And so, for example, the first effort that we pursued was around refugee resettlement. It was an issue that was near and dear to one client in particular, and he was willing, and his wife were willing to commit a significant amount of money to sort of partner, in this case it was with MacArthur and Lever for Change, to sort of cast a wide net of the universe and source the best of sort of philanthropic deal flow in the area of refugee resettlement. And the hope would be that as we got down to a few finalists, others in the ICONIQ ecosystem who cared about that issue would raise their hand and say, sure, we want to give money away to this cause. We don't really have time to build our own charitable arm and expertise in this issue. We know the issue is really critical. We don't have time to wait until we've retired or we've ultimately found our own foundation staff. And so in this instance, the hundreds of organizations whittled down to 20. Our clients got it down to 5 finalists. And this was actually in the middle of COVID. The program's less than 4 years old. In one 90-minute Zoom, we invited other ICONIQ families who shared the interest in refugee resettlement. We heard the pitch from the 5 finalists, so everyone got a sort of chance to understand what these organizations did and the impact they could have. And within those 90 minutes, the $10 million that initially was funded by the initial client turned into 12, turned into 14, turned into 18, turned into $24.5 million in 90 minutes. And then Mackenzie Bezos and the IKEA Foundation got behind it and turned it into north of 40 million. And so the idea was the humility of a client initially to say, I care about this issue, but I don't have the time or the expertise to solve it on my own. We don't have the time to waste for me to figure this all out on my own, even though they're smart enough to do it. And then the humility of other ICONIQ families to get behind this particular client who shared an interest and said, it's really important that we tackle this issue And then for Mackenzie Bezos and IKEA Foundation to come in behind that. So the whole idea is to just get capital flowing to proven, scalable organizations that are doing incredible work, and not reinvent the wheel and not let ego sort of drive this sense that, once I solve this company and take it public and retire, I'll go tackle education, or I'll go tackle this, I'll go tackle that. It really is this humility to say, let's go find the best subject matter expert in this particular issue area. Let's trust their philanthropic deal flow and their ability to vet those deals, and then let's collaborate and both leverage not just the capital, but the time and talent of the ICONIQ clients who know how to scale a company and know how to scale an organization, and really sort of leverage the network to drive real social change.
I love that model in the sense that there's no shortage of intent from a lot of high net worth individuals or philanthropic organizations, but the timeline, right, to be able to, as you said, to vet it, to think you get it right, the amount of time it takes to deploy that capital and the opportunity cost that's lost when it is in a silo and not necessarily across a collective, which I think, again, is a great way to think differently about how we put capital into really important issues at speed. Erin, you do so at Pivotal Ventures as well, which was founded by Melinda Gates, accelerating progress by removing social barriers that hold people back, investing in women-led funds and companies. But the work that you're doing is you are not a nonprofit. You are backing really interesting, viable businesses, but you're also taking a number of different approaches in the ways in which you invest, different structures. Can you talk through how you've had to take a more expansive approach to the models for doing this, and what are some of the takeaways, again, to be able to think outside of the more traditional frameworks?
Sure, and thanks, Moira, for having us here today. And it's so exciting to be discussing this topic, because when I think about Pivotal Ventures, we were designed by our design to expand the impact toolkit, and recognizing that to advance social progress and specifically advance women's power and influence, we need to pull multiple levers to do that. You need traditional philanthropy, you need policy and advocacy work, strategic partnerships along the line of what Michael was talking about with other philanthropists and donors, and you need investment capital. Philanthropy can address market failures, policy can do that as well, but you need investments to really drive innovation and unlock sustainable solutions that are market-based. And that's the work that we're trying to lead, specifically with our investment strategy at Pivotal. We take an approach to diligence, in the private market specifically, that recognizes that there are sort of structural biases in place that limit who has access to capital. And we're not trying to lower the bar in our work at all. We're trying to reframe it, right, and adjust some of these truisms around, what is due diligence to get at the underlying risks that we're trying to assess as investors, to then back some founders that are going to be building companies in segments of the economy that are really going to drive tremendous growth. And we realize we can't do it alone. So similar to what Michael was saying, it's really important to collaborate with other philanthropists, with other investors, to bring more capital to bear at scale. And we've done that using our voice, using our convening power. We try to be early as investors into our funds, so being in a first close, where we can, to catalyze others, sharing our diligence, not being too proprietary with our underwriting, because again, if we're not open about what we're doing, it's going to make it a lot harder for others to follow and others to join us, and again, take longer for these solutions to drive impact at scale. So it comes back to looking at the models that exist and asking the questions of, how do we underwrite this to open up the pie, right? To create more seats at the table so that more people of color, more underrepresented founders and fund managers are able to bring their ideas forward and have an opportunity to pitch us and others.
So much of this is about expanding these toolkits. It's about activating communities intent. Mike, as you mentioned earlier, in terms of your community. Bing, Goldhouse is an extraordinary example of this. This was launched to bring together the Asian Pacific community, coming out of crisis, COVID-19 and the like, all these factors that took a huge toll on this community. But you've galvanized in a way for nonprofit, for-profit, and really have tapped into this extraordinary power of coalition and identity and deployed capital, both culturally and financially, in terms of extraordinary opportunities at a very fast pace. Can you share your model and what can be learned from what has been so galvanizing in bringing this forward?
I appreciate that. Thank you again to the Forbes family, of course, and Moira for coming. To be somewhat loaded and the least millennial, my model for everything is the church. All of the most powerful cultural institutions follow this illustrative model. One is we started with the core manifesto or practical North Star, because our diaspora in particular, despite being millennia old, has actually not had concentricity. It's not necessarily a single race, a single language. We're cornered to every edge of the earth. We don't have a universal historic struggle like slavery, which I'm grateful we do not have slavery. I hope you all celebrated Juneteenth yesterday, by the way, so forth and so on. And so in lieu of a shared history or reason to convene, we focus instead on shared destiny. And so our analogs, to be a bit pedantic, were actually Singapore and the UAE, two nation states, countries that are ironically roughly 6 decades old, too young to have a codified identity, similar to the notion of Asian American, which is also 6 decades old. And despite that, have successfully become the multinational hubs for the entire Asia Pacific and West Asia regions. It's entirely because of their North Star, which is economics. So our North Star was, how do we actually create net new economic opportunity that then can trickle down and immediately dismantle pernicious cultural stereotypes? The second and third piece are my other model for life, which I would argue is also the church, which is the Walt Disney Company. The Walt Disney Company, despite its 5 to 6 divisions, is effectively a bifurcated model. Half of their IP and studios are about truth-telling, about sort of reshaping public opinions through narrative. And then the other half, Disney Plus, CPG, site-based entertainment, are effectively just distribution and monetization engines. So that was really instructive to us of we need two halves to our holistic ecosystem. One is this incredible media apparatus so we can get our portcos out to the mainstream, so we can get people out to the mainstream, not just for attention, UA, and brand building, but also just because it's exciting. And then second is how do we actually have the services, the products, the capital, the funds, and so forth to ensure that their opportunities are sustained.
And again, it's been remarkable to see the work that you've done. Igor, you're approaching this from a slightly different perspective, and then in the sense that the other panelists are talking often about different impact opportunities. But you have spoken about, at the end of the day, building a successful business is first and foremost, and that's what enables you to drive change at scale. One of the things I really admire about WorldQuant is the ways in which you've gone into countries where hedge funds have not spent time, where you've really created these extraordinary talent pools and developed these ecosystems in a way where business is really this enabler of opportunity, but you're investing in human capital and potential where others have overlooked. Can you share that strategy and your approach?
Yes, thank you. Sure, we have 26 offices in 13 countries. Some of these countries, countries like Vietnam, where we have virtually no competition in the hedge fund space. And we enter these countries because we believe talent is distributed uniformly around the world. Opportunity is not. And so we go there, we get the best and the brightest, and we teach them our trading processes, and then they become the part of the global WorldQuant ecosystem. And they do well generally, and then the multiplier effects kick in, and it helps other businesses in the local economy, and it's just a good thing for everybody. And we have kind of, you know, we have like a pyramid, right? First you have to make the money. Once you make the money, you can decide where to give the money, who to give the money to, how much to give the money, and how to do it. And I understand that in USA, about 2.9% of GDP goes to philanthropic ventures. I also understand that target from different sources, some of them biblical, might be 10%, so we could be giving more than we're giving. But first you make the money, then you decide how to distribute it. How to distribute it, we also have our ideas. We invest in education, our own education. We've created a WorldQuant University, which gives a completely free financial engineering degree in quantitative finance. Graduates about 1,000 to 2,000 people per year, which makes it biggest such a program in the world. And education is a program that spans multiple generations. It's a gift that keeps giving. And so that's what we do in a nutshell.
Well, it is easier said than done to be able to develop these talent pipelines in some of these markets. And so to do so at scale and then to take those learnings and really create this multiplier effect has been really exciting to watch and many lessons learned, I'm sure, for all of us. Mike, I'll go back to you. You talked earlier about these new models and ways in which capital is being deployed. It's being deployed differently from a number of different perspectives, just how quickly, the diligence, the trust, these collabs. But at the end of the day, when the money goes, is put forth, what is the different dynamic now in terms of how you measure impact? When many of the things that you do, for example, I know you did a recent documentary, sort of a cultural narrative similar to Big, those are these intangible areas of impact. But how do you think differently about measurement and communicating that in a way where you're also really setting new benchmarks as for what success looks like?
Yeah, I think measuring has always been tricky in the philanthropic world, and what we're trying to promote, which is not our idea or something super novel, but I think it's really important, is this notion of trust-based philanthropy. Because you created enormous wealth over here doesn't necessarily mean you have the expertise to give it away super intelligently tomorrow in another aspect of the economy like philanthropy. And so the idea of trust-based philanthropy is once you've done the work, which starts with if the issue is ocean health, as an avid lover of oceans and someone who cares passionately about that, I'm the first to admit I don't really know, or at least didn't before we did the Ocean Health collab, what the levers are for ocean health. How do you ultimately build a portfolio of world-class not-for-profits that are going to have as much impact as possible in solving ocean health and ultimately climate change? So finding the partner that really understands ocean health, has spent decades looking at ocean health from all aspects, finding partners that operate within ocean health, and ultimately creating that sourcing mechanism of philanthropic organizations within ocean health, and then an expert that can vet and diligence those like we would on the investing side. That to me is the critical piece of ultimately having the confidence that the capital you're unlocking is having the best chance possible of going to organizations that are proven and that are scalable and have been vetted by an expert. Once you've done that work, there needs to be an element of letting go. There needs to be an element saying to the organization, this is a multi-year commitment. We're not going to impose our KPIs on you, but rather what are the KPIs we should look through and how are we going to hold one another accountable over the course of the next few years. And so what you're doing is you're letting the organizations articulate what's really important to them in terms of measuring their results, but you're also giving them the freedom to go do the work and not perpetually fundraise and not perpetually try to put a square peg through a round hole by fitting, our, investment KPIs through a philanthropic lens. So I would say it's really about this process of getting to the place where you can have trust-based philanthropy.
And I would imagine it's an opportunity for your funders, right, in a very different way to let go and create a different framework for how they traditionally invest in any areas. Erin, I'll turn to you because it requires, again, these new models and these new frameworks in terms of how we look at impact. When you look at the work that you're doing at Pivotal Ventures, there's many traditional frameworks and biases that are inherently built into who has a seat at the table, how capital is deployed. You've done some really creative things in terms of new measurements or ways to assess opportunity that actually opens the doors and really creates access points that didn't exist before. Can you talk us through a few examples of that and how you think others can take those insights and be able to think differently about how they look at these opportunities?
Sure. It's not about lowering the bar, it's just reframing it. And that's something that I think is incredibly important to remember when you're approaching and coming at this set of issues. There are sort of three parts of our process that I want to quickly walk through. One is being willing to invest early. And I can point to an example. We incubated and ultimately anchored a fund called Magnify Ventures out of our office at Pivotal that's investing in technology to support modern families. Now, this was 5-6 years ago that we started doing some of this research, and we actually sized the care economy as a $648 billion market. That's bigger than the pharmaceutical industry. But no one was talking about it. And we're all caregivers at some point in our lives, right? Whether you're a parent, you're caring for your own parents, people in your community, neighbors, friends, et cetera. But no one was willing to kind of step out and take that risk. So once we saw that opportunity, we were able to come in and find a team and to support them early with that capital for them to start to prove out that thesis. Warehousing a few investments, giving them that runway to then raise the fund, and they're out in market now for their second fund to continue to prove and build on that thesis. So it was a willingness to go early and bring others along with us. Two, it's looking at some of these markers like a track record, for example, and trying to assess, what is the risks that we're really wanting to underwrite when someone says, well, I need to see, decades plus of investment experience or Y number of deals. That's structurally going to limit who might have access to the capital and a seat at the table as they're raising their fund. So particularly at the early stages in a venture, what are the other bits of your life story that are unique and relevant to your investment thesis that we can look back to over time to build this mosaic of what is your track record? So as an example, maybe you were an operator. Your thesis is I'm going to support these companies in a certain way at this stage, leveraging the networks and the experience I've had directly as a founder myself. So let's go back and do dozens of reference calls to understand and underwrite, how you did that, and again, how it's going to directly apply to your investment thesis. That might not be demonstrable in a set number of deals or a set number of companies that you've already invested in or Y number of exits. But if I can draw the through line back to your lived experience and the work you've done in the past and how that's going to tie to the thesis that you have today, that creates the space for us to, again, come in and take those risks. And the third piece is again, being very transparent and open and sharing with others, what we're doing and creating the space for them to come along with us. I mean, I look at all of us on the stage, and Bing and I have had many conversations about, deal flow and opportunities to collaborate. And it's not just about, Pivotal and our platform alone, it's what can we do to bring others along with us to prove out that case and test those models and bring more capital to bear for these founders and fund managers.
And then these new models, Bing, in your world include really this pioneering way of bringing together this interplay of culture, capital, social change, and activating it. When you think about the opportunities in front of you, as we talked earlier, many of these things are intangible, types of things. But how do you advise others in terms of leaning into this interplay of maybe non-traditional things that really can complement and accelerate impact and opportunity in ways that previously were overlooked?
I think there are sort of two approaches. One is we often say that money can't just be green, it needs to be gold, which means it needs to be good and great. So the first is actually a mental shift. For instance, most nonprofits, or many nonprofits, are just not well run. 90% of their annual income comes from a gala with a bunch of celebrities that don't care about them. That is alarming to me. And so we need to teach our philanthropic leaders to think more profitably of what are the recurring sources of revenue and also multitudinous sources of revenue beyond and or in addition to the great foundations of the world. The second is looking at all of us coming, particularly marginalized folks from marginalized causes, as coming not from a place of punishment or victimization or charity, which immediately is pejorative and will often be treated with less, less diligence, but instead coming from a place of power. So I'll give you an example of the Asian diaspora. Harvard Business Review says we're the least likely demographic to be promoted to management, but actually we're the most successful founders, one could argue, which means we're actually the most successful managers. 43% of the companies that have IPO'd in this country in the last 2 years have at least one Asia Pacific founder. That is startlingly high. And then consistently for over 40% this year, the Forbes Minus list is also of Asian descent. Many of them are deal partners and my LPs, my bosses, thank you. But that's the second sort of mental shift, I think, in the broader world. The second set, as a good Taoist, is both inductive and deductive. I think a lot of times in philanthropy, we focus on the cultural imperative or the character-based imperative, when that ultimately is fine and well in God's work, but not sustainable. Instead, we focus on what is the commercial and critical imperative. In venture, this is really obvious. What are the markups? What are the exits? Pretty straightforward. Within our content fund, the sister fund to our venture fund, it's the exact same thing. What are the multiples on production and or distribution acquisition? And then on the critical side, what awards are we winning and what percentage does that represent? Secondly, and it is in that order, as offensive as it may seem, what are the numeric cultural dismantlements that we're actively changing? Whether it's making sure that women are 51% of those who are receiving capital, whether it is in the press, the mind share that we're changing, what does that delta look like over time? And then the final of the hilariously alliterative C's is character. My generation is now, millennials and Gen Z, expect that purpose is profit and profit is purpose. And so what that means at a functional level is you can no longer just amass an immense amount of wealth and capital if you are a candidly bad person. If you are harassing other individuals in any form, you are not acceptable anymore. Those days are over. And so expecting great character to complement that cultural dismantlement is the other sort of secondary consideration that we've used that has really resonated, I think, certainly with our generation, and I think a lot of our partners as well.
So we're talking about underutilized tools or ways to be able to think differently about these problems. Igor, you talked about before about the belief that empowering global talent is imperative in terms of the ways in which you approach your business, but also utilizing predictive technologies and as ways in the work that you're doing at WorldQuant to be able to really address some of these societal issues at scale, the compounding effect of the work that you're doing and the insights to be able to better tackle these problems. Can you talk about the work that you're doing in the context of WorldQuant, but different ways to think about that, applying it to other issues more broadly on a global scale?
Well, if you say what AI is basically prediction. So prediction is changing the way businesses operate throughout anything. And now that we have large language models, really the amount of disruption that has to happen is tremendous. You can literally pick a business and it's obvious what to disrupt about it and what not to disrupt about it, how to put it together. There are legacy businesses which maybe cannot be disrupted too much, and there are new businesses which are created as a result of the AI technologies. So at WorldQuant Predictive, for example, we have just created a process for creating a new company every 3 months. There are so many opportunities, and there are so many things to improve that this is just what should be done, and everybody should be doing it. It's not unique to us by any chance.
Well, you're still doing it in remarkable ways around the world, and again, it's one of the things that stands out is the scale at which you all are working, the pace to be able to bring that pace of innovation and opportunity and the business sector to scale the way that you're doing in other arenas is really incredible. So thank you to all of my panelists. I sleep better at night knowing that leaders such as this exist in the world and doing the work that they do. So thank you to you all.
Thank you. Thank you.